This is the first time we've done a gut health special with a neuroscientist and a gastroenterologist, which for me, I believe is the magic combination of this discussion, connecting the mind and the gut.
Emeran Mayer is a leading gastroenterologist and neuroscientist whose research on the gut-brain connection
is transforming our understanding of health and emotions.
For a long time, IBS was only considered a gut disease. Still, for a lot of my colleagues, it is, and IBD even more. Most IBD specialists do not consider the brain playing any significant role.
Why should people be more aware of this?
When I gave lectures to IBD patients, my first question was always, how many people in the room think that stress plays any role in their symptoms? And every hand went up.
My hand's going up now. And you actually advise cognitive behavioral therapy for people that suffer with IBS.
The big mechanism how the brain works is based on expectations. It makes projections within minutes what's going to happen, and these are influenced by emotions. If you can just deal with this anxiety and fear of disease, that's a big part of IBS.
Oats are becoming very demonized today. Kind of got these like two camps, one saying people eat oats to lose weight, and then the other people demonizing oats, saying oats is terrible for you and it spikes your blood sugar.
Was ridiculous. Something like this can only start in social media without any basis, really.
Why do we think that psychedelics is having such a moment?
I would say in 10 years from now, we will know the answer and it will be a positive answer. A big component has to do with the microbial response to it.
What would you say is a roadmap to someone who's wanting to improve their gut health?
So the first step has to be...
Firstly, I want to say thank you to tuning in and listening to the show. It means a huge amount. And connecting with all of you is something that I absolutely love as part of this journey of growing the show. One of my biggest goals of 2025 is doubling the reach of this show. And I can't do that without your support. So I would love to ask you a favor. If you can press subscribe or follow on whichever platform you listen to. This helps us reach more people. And for me, elevating women in science is so fundamental and ethical and scientific information. So if you feel the show empowers you and gives you the information that you've been seeking, I would love to ask a favor in return and to hit that subscribe button and help me reach the goal that I've set for the show of 2025. Thank you. Emeran, welcome to Live Well, Be Well. I'm so excited about this today because this is the first time we've done a gut health special with a neuroscientist and a gastroenterologist, which for me, I believe is the magic combination of this discussion, connecting the mind and the gut. And I say that because I actually want to start with a couple of stats. So IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and IBD, irritable bowel disease, two different syndromes. And I was just looking at some stats, and these are quite similar between the UK and the US. So 39% of IBS patients experience anxiety. 29% of IBS patients experience depression. 1/3 of IBD patients experience anxiety, and 1/4 of IBD patients experience depression. And so they might change very slightly between the two countries, but overall, generally, we're seeing that this is quite a big percentage of people that suffer with gut problems and people that suffer with their mental health. So I want to start there, really, with the stats. Why is it so important to talk about this in combination as opposed in isolation?
So before I start my answer to you, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this show. It's really a pleasure talking to you and about topics that obviously are very important to me as well as they are to you. So this observation that anxiety, a brain-generated phenomenon, is associated with these traditionally pure bowel disorders, So for a long time, IBS was only considered a gut disease. Still, for a lot of my colleagues, it is, and IBD even more. Most IBD specialists do not consider the brain playing any significant role. Has changed a little bit in recently, but it's not surprising because anytime you have a chronic disturbance of your bowel function, there's such close connections to the brain, particularly to the emotional parts of your brain, that you almost have to have some sort of a associated brain component or mental component to it. It would be hard to explain biologically why that would not be the case. And It's probably a little bit different between IBS and IBD. And we've done many studies comparing those two populations. So you mentioned the anxiety, but it's also a lot of patients with inflammatory bowel disease still have symptoms, IBS-like symptoms, when they're in full clinical remission. So when their mucosa has healed and there's no inflammatory markers, fecal calprotectin in the stool. So they still have these symptoms. And, gastroenterologists are always trying to figure out, well, maybe the dose of treatment wasn't high enough, we have to, or they need new IBD treatments. But it's much more likely, I think, that this is the mental component of this disease. And anxiety is something, I would say any emotion like anxiety, same thing for depression, maybe a little bit less. The gut always has a mirror image of what goes on in those emotional circuits within your brain, these networks. Like you can tell this easily if you look at somebody's face and this person is anxious, you can see it in the face. And the same reaction our gut has. So when you're anxious, just what you see in the face, could see in the gut if you could look inside, but we don't see it and you don't feel it. Because that connection also affects the brain in a long-term way. So the anxiety is something that you have at the moment when your gut acts up, or you have a spasm, or you have the urgency, or you're afraid to go to a restaurant because you think you might not make it to the bathroom. But the long-term effect of that inflammation in the gut is that, it affects the brain structurally. So it affects,
wow, in what way?
It affects your cognitive circuits within the brain. And there are large studies that have shown it's a risk factor for developing early cognitive decline if you have untreated colitis. Not everybody will get that, but if you have. So
wow.
I would say these two diseases are very similar in terms of the anxiety, in terms of probably also in terms of symptom perception. So this symptom-related fears, for example, are present in both disorders. And so uncontrolled diarrhea, fecal incontinence, having cramps. There's always this anxiety related to the symptoms.
Yeah, I think most people who might be having gut problems but might have not labeled them or might not have either of these two conditions. Why should people be more aware of this? Because I think we can very quickly isolate, I've just got a bad tummy, or I'm suffering with brain fog or low mood. But very rarely do we put these together. So why is it important that we have to be aware of this?
Well, it is important because, the treatment is similar in both situations. So, for example, a largely plant-based diet like the traditional Mediterranean diet has been shown to be beneficial. It has to be modified, but it has to be beneficial in both IBS and IBD. In IBD, that insight only came a few years ago because IBD docs did not pay attention to diet at all, just like other gastroenterologists. But then studies came out that actually, if you're in remission, a largely plant-based diet with lots of fiber and polyphenols is actually beneficial and protects against the recurrences. The opposite was recommended earlier, that people said. Now, if you have a flare, this may not be true. You may go on a
low fiber.
Little fiber in your diet, but that's so two different phases. The other thing is techniques that target the mind, work in both conditions. So mindfulness-based stress reduction, all the self-relaxation techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy, they all work in both conditions. In IBD, maybe more in the subsets of patients that have the anxiety. So if you're in IBD, and these diseases are heterogeneous. It's not every patient is the same, but somebody who has more of these mental symptoms, they will definitely benefit from those techniques that are also been shown in IBS to work. Now, this concept runs into a lot of opposition from IBD physicians. Is that like in our institution, like when I give a lecture and talk about this, then the senior people get up and said, I don't want that anybody who leaves this seminar come away with the message that treating the brain has any benefit for IBD. So there's still this ingrained thing.
That's really sad.
It's really sad.
Because you talk a lot about the bi-directional response.
Yeah.
I think I read that you don't like the word gut-brain connection or something like that because it is bi-directional. And we have signals coming from the brain via the vagus nerve into the gut, and vice versa. We have a huge amount of signals coming from the gut up the vagus nerve into the brain. So they're constantly communicating. So I still find that is secure science. So I still find it odd that gastroenterologists are fighting the idea that using the mind as well as another alternative therapy to help treat these gut conditions shouldn't be acknowledged.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's gotten better in some major academic institutions, like at UCLA. We have a program, a digestive wellness program that deals with this. There's other places like Johns Hopkins. There's several other places now, big academic centers that. But for the general practitioner, that's not something that they really. But I always remember the time, when I gave lectures to patients, to IBD patients. So my first question was always, so how many people in the room? There were like 50 people. How many people in the room think that the brain or that stress plays any role in their symptoms? And every hand went up.
My hand's going up now.
And when you ask that same question to a IBD specialist, they would say, "No, that this has nothing to do with each other. Different issues." And there is one reason that patients for a long time refused it, because for physicians, something that goes on in the mind is just psychological. It's not a real
psychosomatic.
Problem. Yeah, but I do want to emphasize, things are improving, so the brain-gut concept and the mind-gut concept has clearly, and I would say in the last 10 years, has really improved significantly. And younger, so I see it in the pre-med students that come to us to do some work to get into medical school. Most of whom are actually women. Maybe that has to do with it as well, that women have more intuitive insight into these connections. And so I think it's a good thing. It's a good development.
So you believe that IBS, and this is not IBD, is not just a gut disorder, and you actually advise cognitive behavioral therapy for people that suffer with IBS. So maybe let's start there, because I really want to get on to the food in a second, but let's start with the mind, which is important. So how can CBT also, which is abbreviated, be helped as a useful tool for people that suffer with IBS?
So it's a big part of a big mechanism how the brain works is based on expectations. It makes projections on within minutes what's going to happen, and more long term, and then and these are influenced by emotions. So these projections, or these anticipations what's going to happen plays a big role in creating anxiety, and then stimulating the sympathetic nervous system to go down to the gut and actually cause the symptoms. And if you can just deal with this fear, or this anxiety and fear of disease, that's a big part of IBS. And we know what the circuits within the brain are. There's these salient circuits. The brain constantly, just like a self-driving cars, that constantly monitors the environment and then makes predictions of what's going to happen, along the way, within seconds, within minutes, within hours. If that system is biased towards being more sensitive, then so the self-driving car would stop at a lot of places where it doesn't have to stop, And the same thing happens with IBS. If that system constantly generates signals that then turn the warning lights on.
Wow. Okay. And that's where it predicts, where the brain is predicted. Because we had Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's also a neuroscientist, on the show as well. She talked a lot about, our emotions and how we are already predicting what's about to happen in front of us, which I found really helpful for a way of visualizing, how you cope with different things and adverse experiences day to day.
And this, maybe one more word to this, that the brain, people have called it the best prediction machine in the universe. So what you do, for example, with mindfulness-based stress reduction is to counteract this, because you don't want to live constantly with these predictions. You want to live in the moment,
in the present, yeah,
in the present. And I think the reason it has these benefits because it turns off that program that we have, which has helped us as humans for survival.
I was going to say, like, other therapies could be like mindfulness, breathing exercises. I find that really helpful.
Breathing exercises, and that's an interesting mechanism that we have built into our physiology. If we do this abdominal breathing, we send signals through the vagus nerve into the brain of relaxation. So the stress breathing is something where we hyperventilate, and you can see it in animals better than in humans. And if you ask somebody, like if you ask a patient, take a deep breath in, so typically they do it into the chest, because that's sort of what we've.
Yeah, they do it more, if you're watching on YouTube, more up here, just below kind of the bra line, as opposed into the diaphragm.
Yeah, and that sends, so this stress breathing sends a signal to the brain that your body is in a stressful situation. If it sends the vagal signal, it tells the brain I'm in a relaxed mode, a relaxed situation, and the brain can't deal with both of those at the same time. You either relaxed or you're stressed. It's interesting that children, I think it's about until the age of, forgot now what the age is, 8 or 10, have natural abdominal breathing, and then when they get into the adult world, they switch it to the chest breathing.
Wow.
And it's such a simple mechanism. You can do it anywhere. You can learn it within a very short period of time. I've seen patients who can't do it, who absolutely, it's an interesting phenomenon too, that you ask them to breathe into their belly and you put your hand on their belly and, to demonstrate it easier. But there's some patients who cannot do that. It's so programmed in their brain that they're always under stress.
The stress, I was going to say, are they so hypervigilant that they cannot shut off? Yeah. Well, I guess, I don't know, my thought process would be getting them more into somatic work, right? Like more body work to help calm them down, to be able to bring less hypervigilance to them, to get them to interact with breathing exercises more.
Yeah, and these signals, the brain-body signals, most of them are bidirectional. You can do relaxation and like autogenic training, for example, where all your limbs become heavy and warm. Feels really good. But that also sends back a signal to the brain, I am relaxed. So it's like this feedback loop, just like with the gut, so none of these things happen in isolation.
I've spent years in the fashion industry, but also years as a scientist, trying to understand how our bodies are meant to move. And I'll be honest with you, most shoes are terrible for our feet. I know this firsthand. For years, I wore the wrong shoes, ones that looked great, but in reality gave me persistent back pain and messed up toenails. I searched everywhere for a pair of shoes that wouldn't just support my feet, but would also help them heal. And I struggled because most healthy shoes don't exactly scream style. And then I found Vibo Barefoot, something that finally looks good and actually works. I wear mine with cargo pants, awesome leather trousers, a crisp white tee, and my favorite sunnies. Not only do they feel great, but they really fit my style. Wide, thin, and flexible, these shoes allow my feet to move naturally the way they're supposed to. And the best part, Just 6 months of barefoot shoes can increase your foot strength by 60%, helping to undo the years of damage from conventional footwear. Now, if you've ever had the same problem and tried to find a shoe that supports your body without sacrificing style, then this is it. Try Vivo Barefoot for yourself and feel the difference. You can get 20% off if you use the code LWBW20 at vivobarefoot.com, where the T's and C's apply. Trust me, your feet, your back, and your outfit will thank you.
Well, I'm such a big believer in, as you are, in the interconnectedness of the body. And I think it's one of those things that when we think about gut health, we naturally just veer towards food, which is why I didn't want to start our conversation. We will lead into the nutritional kind of aspects and the FODMAP diet and the do's and the don'ts and all that type of thing that go with gut health in general. But I think it's one of those things that we should be treating together. And do you think that are we increasing naturally in our gut disorders? Are we becoming sicker with our gut health, do you think? Or are we just becoming more aware?
I think we're becoming more aware. That's the main thing. To me, it was fascinating to see in the last 10 years how gut health has become, even 5 years, it's become such a catchword in social media, and books have been written about it. And I always find it interesting because, as a gastroenterologist, you're specialist in gut diseases, not gut health. That term you wouldn't even know how to define it other than absence of disease. But now what we understand is, the gut is behind the brain, the most complex organ in our body. And, made up of its own 70% of our immune system, and has its own nervous system, 150 million neurons, and has the biggest endocrine hormonal system. And all these systems, subsystems in the gut interact with each other. So gut health is if these systems are all in balance, and that's something that you can't see from the outside.
No, of course. And I think why it's really important is because I think we've always got something that we can quickly take that can either dissolve a symptom of our gut health problems, whether it's a peppermint tablet or, I don't know, I was with a friend the other day and they came back and they were hyper bloated and they just came in and said, oh, I'm really bloated, I feel awful, and chucked down a papaya enzyme down their throat to kind of deal with it and shut it off. So there's no kind of exploration on why am I becoming so bloated, right? Because now we're also marketed so many different pills and tablets to kind of shut it off quite quickly.
Yeah, and so the comparison, so if you think, one of the most complex biological computer systems in the universe is the gut. I mean, the most complex is the brain, obviously, but the gut comes next. So to have this illusion that you can throw in a tablet and fix this imbalance of these systems in that complex system is ridiculous. The only way it can work is really through the placebo response if you do that, because then you get the brain involved and the brain takes care of it. So the brain knows how to take care of the gut,
Wow.
And
so do you think a lot of these things that we take are actually having a placebo effect as opposed to directly helping the gut?
I think it's a big portion of it. People have estimated, well, we see it in the clinical trials, 50% in a clinical trial, people respond as a placebo response. In IBD trials, for example, with very invasive medications that modulate the immune system. So I think that's something we still look at it as something that is not that important or is not real or is an enemy of the pharmaceutical industry but I personally think this innate healing ability of the brain is phenomenal, and it's not just healing, it's keeping things in balance. And when something goes wrong, restore balance and create resilience. That's really what the placebo response or these brain systems do, all the time.
Yeah, I'm the biggest advocate of what you say there for a very strong reason that I have a very healthy diet. I have this is my area of research. I've suffered with bowel conditions my entire life. Last year, because we're in the new year, I had a very healthy diet, nothing had really changed, but my stress had gone up exponentially from a horrific relationship that ended. And that caused, obviously, a catastrophic change in my body, which led to a bowel obstruction. And, it's one of those things that I've always been very aware of what I eat, because I know I suffer with conditions like what we've been speaking about. And yet it doesn't matter how many perfect foods I eat that's on my plate, or how much exercise I get, or, how many digestive enzymes or probiotics that I might take. What killed me was the stress. What totally blocked my body's signals was stress, and it ended in a bowel obstruction. And the sad thing was, there was obviously I had very high inflammation, but there was no rhyme or reason to say, this is the direct cause of what's happened to you. We can give you a logical response. This is what's happened. There actually wasn't. And the irony is that it's stress for me.
And what was the reason for the increased stress level in your case?
So I came out of an awful relationship, a very stressful one that I didn't see coming. And that caused to me a huge shock response. There was no understanding of what had happened. And I think because it resulted in PTSD, I would basically say, that had caused my body to shut down. And I think the irony of this is that from doing this job and having so many amazing people sit in front of me, it's made me more of a self-aware person, because I'm very privileged to have all these conversations, and I'm very interested in that area. I'm very interested in health. So I could have a checklist of everything that I do. And I think that's why I find this conversation so important, because I don't want people just to believe that they have a checklist, that everything's going to be fine. When stress hits us, sometimes which is unexplainable or uncontrollable, our body, my gut reacted in such a way that, I lost, I think, a stone in a week and a half, and that's from something that was uncontrollable. And it shows you the power of the mind to the gut, until in the end, when my body just said, enough, and I think that's the power of the gut-brain connection that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think a good way to understand this, the gut receives influences from the brain, a lot of influences, 24/7. As we said earlier, anything that goes on in the brain has a mirror image in the gut in terms of secretion, blood flow, immune activity, microbiome composition and function. But it also gets influences through our diet, in shocking amounts, that we put things in that the gut has never seen before and the microbes have never seen. And then we do other things which influences that go through the brain, like sleep and things. So the gut gets all these influences from the outside world, some filtered through the brain, generated by the brain, others from the environment with food and chemicals, and not everybody's gut integrates those influences the same way. So for some people, the stress response is not as dramatic as it may be in others. So we've been doing studies where we found that there's people with an increased stress reactivity or stress responsiveness. We can identify unique features of the brain of these individuals. So you take 100 people, expose them to the same stress, and 40 of them have the increased stress response. The others don't show it. So if you have that increased stress responsiveness, the influences of the brain, both in positive and negative dimensions, are obviously much greater. For somebody else who's like the ultimate stoic person, the diet may play a bigger role, or the exercise may play a bigger role. So I think that's why we kind of recommend this multidisciplinary approach to chronic diseases or gut diseases, which covers the whole spectrum, But it's not one size fits all. A lot of discussion now about this personalized medicine, But I think this is one of the biggest parts of it, that the influences on the gut, the multiple from the genes to the, what we talked about, the brain, the diet, they're so varied and so different between different individuals. I mean, that story that this triggered this stress, with a bad relationship, I could introduce you to at least 20 patients I've had with IBD. Exactly the same story,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the time when I suffer with my flare-ups the most is, and this is personal, is my personal experience, is stress. Well, let's go on to the dietary supplements, because something that's come up a lot is digestive enzymes. Can you talk about what digestive enzymes are first, and then whether we should be supplementing with them or not? Because people might not know where they are.
Yeah, so this is an area I rarely talk about. So digestive enzymes, secrete. So our pancreas is the main source of the most important digestive enzymes that are essential for breaking down protein and fat in the small intestines or the pancreas. So the pancreas secretes 10 times as many enzymes that are really necessary to do it. So nature has built this redundancy in it, or this, so you have to lose 9/10 of your pancreatic tissue before you actually become deficient in these enzymes.
Okay.
And develop this serious condition, pancreatic insufficiency. And so that's the physiology that we know. There's lots of studies on that but then there's a whole new way of thinking in functional medicine, that we need to take digestive enzymes. We don't break down things sufficiently. And that, these supplements with digestive enzymes have major benefits. I have to admit I've not followed that literature if there are any studies that really look into this. If you don't have pancreatic insufficiency, that's the population I'm talking about, that people feel better taking, much higher amounts of pancreatic enzymes that they need. This is one of the things with traditional medicine. I would say I do not agree with the usefulness of the pancreatic enzyme component of treatments. But that's just one aspect of these functional remedies. That now, if you have demonstrated, if you had a severe bout of alcoholic pancreatitis, or if you have chronic pancreatitis and you've knocked out most of your pancreas, or if you had a surgery because you had pancreatic cancer and they took out your pancreas, this Whipple's procedure,
then they might be effective.
Then you have to take them.
An everyday person who maybe has a few gut problems, maybe some bloating, flatulence, some distension, that's suffering with their gut health, undiagnosed, would you suggest a digestive enzyme?
I would not recommend this. I mean, there are a lot of these myths. I'm just bringing this up because of the pancreatic enzymes. So one of the main functions of the stomach and stomach acid is actually not breaking down or digesting the food. It's dispersing it into very small particles for the contractions of the stomach that are optimal for the pancreatic enzymes to act on.
Let me tell you about OneSkin and why I'm genuinely fascinated by what they're doing. Founded by all-women team scientists, OneSkin is a skincare brand that's redefining how we age. And you can get 15% off your first order using code LWBW. What's caught my attention is their groundbreaking approach to skin health at a cellular level. Instead of masking the signs of aging, OneSkin tackles the problem at its root with its OS01 peptide. Here's how it works. As we age, our skin accumulates senescent cells, or zombie cells, that speed up aging in healthy cells, causing wrinkles and loss of elasticity. OneSkin's OS01 peptide is scientifically proven to target these cells, reversing your skin's biological age for healthier, more resilient skin. This isn't about chasing eternal youth. It's about maintaining a strong, healthy skin at any age. And since your skin is the body's largest organ, keeping it healthy is key to your overall well-being. So if you want to see what the science of longevity can do for your skin, visit oneskin.co/LWBW and use code LWBW for 15% off your first order. I want to talk about like what we should be including in our diet. So for people that might have IBS, IBD, or are healthy, this might all be quite different. But something that I found quite interesting that we haven't explored on this podcast yet is microbiota. Am I saying that? Microbiota-based nutrition. What is that?
Microbiota-based nutrition.
Yeah.
So nutrition, that term, I'm actually not, maybe that's the term on social media that's very common.
Oh, I saw that on your Instagram, so that's why I pulled it up.
It's microbiota-targeted nutrition, yeah. Yeah, so this is something that makes diet actually very straightforward and simple.
Okay.
So
great, we do know about this. This is good. I swear I saw this on your, but this is the targeted part that I missed out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what microbes like the most, what they thrive on, are these large molecules that are not absorbed in the small intestine, but make it all the way down to the end of the small intestine, the ileum, and to the colon. And these are mainly these large complex carbohydrates, which are contained in fiber. So fiber are basically
fibrous food.
Yeah. And if you take out the fiber from your food, as we've done in Western societies, and you're the guest on your show that talked a lot about this, it's well known, Will Bulsiewicz, then you essentially starve your microbes, because now all of a sudden this food that they have evolved in evolution to help us with to digest this, they no longer get their food supply. And there's other examples of these large molecules. So polyphenols are another one.
And that's the pigment in a lot of colorful fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, so one of my favorite molecules, kind of, they haven't really gotten the credit that they deserve in terms of...
Well, let's give it now.
In sort of health. So also a lot of myths around this. So there was a big enthusiasm with polyphenols and antioxidants about 20 years ago. And, the NIH or the FDA put up a website. These are all the polyphenols, the antioxidants you need to eat. Because people tested these compounds, again, very large molecules, multiple sugar molecules linked together. And when you tested them in the test tube, they would actually have an antioxidant effect on the cells or in the cell culture.
This is a polyphenol?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you ingest them, the blood levels are very low, almost undetectable.
When you ingest a polyphenol, the blood levels are low.
The plants and the fruits with those, so they don't make it into your blood intact. So the FDA withdrew that website and these recommendations that antioxidants in these different foods are so healthy for you, because in studies they couldn't show that they actually reached the blood levels that would be necessary for a beneficial effect. Well, the answer is very simple, because they're not absorbed intact in the small intestine. They also, like the fiber, goes down to your microbes, the realm of the microbes, and the microbes thrive on them. They break them down into smaller components. Some of these smaller components are absorbed into the systemic circulation and have shown benefits on the brain, on the heart health, many other functions. But the fiber is one of the main end products that they generate are these short-chain fatty acids, or butyrate being the most well-known. That's kind of the aspirin of our bodies, because they have anti-inflammatory effects in the gut, but throughout the body, amongst many other beneficial effects. So if you eat a diet rich in these large molecules...
And so let's talk about which they are. They're the fruits, they're the vegetables, they're the whole grains, all of these very colorful, rich, diverse foods. And also, can I just point out that I always try to say here that it's the abundance of diversity here that's the important factor.
It's the diversity that is beneficial because of all these molecules.
Yeah.
Because if you just eat tomatoes, you may call yourself a vegan, but you're going to die in your 50s. Because it's not. But coming back to this argument, the food that's optimal for your microbes is indirectly optimal for us as well. So if you want to have a high level of butyrate in your gut, in your body, if you want a high level of these polyphenol metabolites, you have to eat these foods.
But then you flip social media and you go to TikTok, and there's oat Zempic as well, which basically, for anyone who hasn't seen the viral trend, it's basically saying that you can have oats that have the same impact as taking a shot of Ozempic, which is a weight loss drug, GLP-1 weight loss drug, or one of the things that it does, GLP-1. So we kind of got these like two camps, one saying people eat oats to lose weight, and then the other people demonizing oats, saying oats is terrible for you and it spikes your blood sugar. So like, let's just talk about this one food as an example of the misinformation and confusion about people having oats.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Ozempic story is, was ridiculous. I mean, something like this can only start in social media, without any basis really. And, like you're comparing one of the most effective weight loss drugs with something that is actually with no evidence behind it. The other issue is, if you do ambulatory blood glucose monitoring, yes, you will see. I mean, you won't get the same spikes as you get with eating sugar, but you will see increases. I'm personally, I would never just say eat your oatmeal and drink your oat milk, and that's the healthiest thing you can do for your microbes. I think, again, it comes to this point of the diverse sources of different kinds of fiber, anything from sweet potatoes to brown rice. I mean, there's so many examples of natural products that have a high amount of fiber that you don't just have to limit it to oats, And
I don't. My fear, and this is my personal opinion, is oats are a whole food, plant-based nutrient that I don't think we should be scared of. And my worry is that oats are becoming very demonized today, where actually I don't like demonizing food. I believe like ultra processed foods are the one thing that I would say I wish everyone could to try and cut down if they can possible. But then we have this emphasis on oats, which in my opinion is a very healthy food. Maybe for a type 2 diabetic, it's something that you should be aware of. Similarly with grapes. Grapes are also going to spike your blood glucose if you are a diabetic, but if you're not like me, then I can have some grapes, and it's one of my healthy 5 a day. And so my worry is that we are very quickly demonizing certain whole foods that actually is high in fiber. And if we mix them with some berries and some seeds, we can actually have a very healthy breakfast. And my fear is that we're kind of having these food wars online at the moment. And my only worry with that is people are going to start stripping more foods out, and I want them to be putting more whole foods into their diet. And I think that there is a real controversy about this online, and I find that quite worrying.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think also what you said, so, our breakfast bowl has a whole variety. It does have oats in it, but it has a lot of other things as well, from chia seeds to berries to goji berries.
Flax seeds in.
Yeah, so it has a lot of different things in it. I think that's what we always have to keep in mind. It's the variety that is the best. I would say if you only limit your breakfast to oats, probably not the best for your body. If you combine it with all this, because I mean that's sort of what both animals but also our ancestors did. They didn't just eat one thing. I mean, they
totally. But I also put the thought out that the typical American diet or the Western diet, even in the UK, I think that's even better food to eat oats than a Pop-Tart or some cereal.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like if we're actually thinking about the conversations that we're putting out online, I'd rather people be demonizing more a Pop-Tart than an oat.
Absolutely.
You know? And if people are just taking the step to say, well, I'm going to move from a cereal to oats, I'm like, great. Yeah. We're doing a brilliant first step. The next step, if we can, is to add in some fruit or to add in some chia seeds or whatever that is. But my fear is that we're just demonizing whole foods. you know?
Yeah, and also what you said about, if you're diabetic, yes, you have to pay. It's a different category. You have to avoid certain things, maybe even the grapes.
Yeah, of course.
But if you're not, the combination that in a grape. So I mean, the grape is not just sugar. It's a lot of polyphenols. That make it into red wine, for example.
And you've got the redness, which can be ethnocyanins, which
yeah.
is also great for the brain.
Yeah. So I think it's an important point. If you have a disease or disorder, you have to eat differently than if you're completely healthy, and you do it prophylactically.
There's two other things that I want to ask, and I don't know if we can try and figure it out in a quick format, but it's the plant-based milks versus the normal milks. Is there one that's better for our gut health? I mean, obviously this does not apply to people that are lactose intolerant or cannot drink milk because they don't have an option, and I don't want people to think that they're going to harm their gut health if they can't physically have that milk. But generally, plant-based milks versus whole milks, what's better for the gut microbiome?
Yeah, I would start with a general concept that lactose, the sugar that's in milk, and lactase, the enzyme that's in our gut that breaks down lactose, are predominantly expressed in our bodies in infancy. Because milk is a key component, like, breast milk is a key component of our early nutrition. And the enzyme that breaks down lactose goes down in its level and sometimes disappears in a lot of peoples around the world, with the exception of Inuits and some Scandinavians. But like Mediterranean countries, they have almost no lactase present in their gut because it's not supposed to be an adult food. Wow.
So we maybe shouldn't be drinking cow's milk.
Yeah. So, and it's one of the things that you want to take out of it's one of the FODMAPs, like dairy products. And
a FODMAP, for people that don't know, is what came out, and Felice Jacker talks about this a lot at Moorish University, which is a food plan to go on for 6 weeks, only for 6 to 8 weeks, and it reduces all the common causes of foods that can cause gas and bloating, and then you reintroduce them back in.
So milk products are one of these. So I would say, just based on what I told you, switching to a plant-based milk is probably a prudent idea. It fits better our physiology. The health benefits, there's a lot of good things in milk, particularly if these always have these images growing up in the Alps, to see the cows way up in the mountains on these alpine meadows, eating the alpine flowers. And there are special products in like Switzerland and Bavaria. We can buy that kind of milk. There must be a lot of healthy things in it, what these cows eat there.
It's very rich in iodine.
Yeah. I normally say, when I go to Europe and I go to these countries that have this milk, and it is totally organic, and it's, you almost call it regenerative organic. And it definitely has health benefits. I would say milk, what the cows eat, has a lot to do with if this milk is good or bad for you, provided you're not lactose intolerant. So I would make that the main criteria. And I think for most milk that's sold in the US, you don't have that guarantee that is actually a health promoting, it's a health promoting drink, which you have with, soy is obviously a healthy, soy protein is a healthy component of a diet. So
yeah, a lot with breast cancer and things like that we found in relationship with soy. So something I really want to talk about as well is outside of, we've done the kind of mental health side with cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness and breathing, and then we've gone on to more of a Mediterranean style diet, I would say, is what I would say the conversation of looking at the microbes, more fiber rich, more colorful, polyphenols, all of those wonderful words, and trying to have an abundant diet, which feels very similar in every conversation I have on Live Well, Be Well with this, unless apart from Chris Palmer when he spoke about the ketogenic diet with mental health specifically. But then coming on to the environmental side. So I think environment has such a big impact on our gut. And I'd be interested, actually, you know, you've lived in Europe as well, and now you're in LA. I'd be interested to see like what your thoughts are on the two sides of the ocean. But something that I find really important to talk about is all the products that we're using in our home. And when I've spoken about this before, it's only been with fertility. So we've had fertility specialists on here saying, you know, the decrease in male sperm count, a large part of it is to do with all of the things that we're using in our homes, all the toxins and the bleaches and all of that type of stuff. When I was looking through Instagram, I found it really interesting that you were talking around leaky gut, and which people might not know what that is, but the gut permeability, which can kind of brings pathogens in and out and cause some disruption in the gut. You spoke about dishwasher detergents. I thought that was really interesting. So I thought we should probably talk about the environmental impact on our gut as well. And what we should maybe be more aware of if people are now listening to this, standing in their home, scouring around thinking, well, what should I maybe be replacing? And is this impacting my gut as well?
Yeah, I mean, that goes to the general issues. You know, our society and lifestyle has declared war on the microbial health. You know, there's no question, in multiple ways, in our diet, in the chemicals that we live with and keep increasing, in the exposure to microplastic. Some of these things have been studied, like, you know, some of the dyes, the food dyes, it's long been in cereals and infant cereals, dishwashing, a detergent. There's many chemicals that either have not been tested sufficiently or have been tested but sort of got, you know, a safety label on them. There's many shortcuts. I think you can avoid the FDA. And I think we have to, like, becoming aware of that. Not just our diet has to become more natural and away from these, from this excessive, you know, processing. But it's also like anything in the environment. I personally, for me personally, the thing that I find the most disturbing is the plastic part.
The microplastics.
Yeah, because so if you, like in the US, Whole Foods is a place, you know, a lot of people buy their vegetables. Even the farmers market, they give you the, you know, like you select your tomatoes, put them into a plastic bag. And so even if you live a healthy food lifestyle, you are importing these plastics into your diet. And
It's
we
true.
know now that they're already everywhere, and you know, in people that have died, you look in the coronary blood vessels. So the microplastics are already in our body. It's already too late to say, and we don't know if you can get rid of them easily once they're locked.
But I think it's up to like 50% of microplastics have been found in the brain. We did an entire episode with this on Dr. Gemma Newman. It's shocking.
Yeah, it is shocking. And, you know, I find it particularly sad that farmers markets have not caught on to this. I mean, somebody should tell them. I mean, I always do. I tell these people, but when they're not decision makers, the people that sell the food in these markets, you know, that they could.
No, and it's also convenience. It's probably much more expensive for people to not do it in that way, you know, and you're kind of going against a storm. But I think as a consumer, to be more aware of this. I mean, the irony is that actually I had a videographer who worked with me, and he said, I tried for a month to buy nothing in plastic. I lasted 3 days. You know, and he was trying to he set himself a challenge, and he was trying to make a really good, thoughtful approach to how he was buying food, and he couldn't do it. You know, and I think that's the irony, that even if so that's kind of an uphill battle. But if we think about what's in our homes, what conscious choices, like how much does it really affect our gut microbiome, these products?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if there are detailed studies that would really demonstrate that, you know, and there's obviously a huge resistance. There's been a huge lobbying influence, I think, of industry, also to protect these plastic the use of plastic. We don't see that, but there's armies of lobbyists from industry, and plastics after automobile fuel is the biggest use of oil.
Yeah.
So the oil industry has a huge stake in that as well. So once you dig down into these things, it becomes very. We as consumers, you can. I think if you go to your own farmer's market and visit the farm, which I've done, you can talk to the owners of the farm and tell them would they implement this, and if you're lucky, they might. But most people won't go through that. They will. It's enormous the amount of plastic that we accumulate each week by eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, just from Whole Foods. These packages.
Yeah, I think it's 1 credit card a week that we consume, which is wild.
But this is just one. So many of these chemicals that are surrounding us. You almost have to say, I'm in awe of the resilience of the human body, really, that it can, and the microbiome, that it can withstand all these things that we have changed in the last 70, 100 years. Because it wasn't always like that, and when you look at how many of these chronic diseases have increased in numbers, it's because so many of these, like taking out all the fiber, taking out, generating ultra-processed foods, the packaging, the emulsifiers, the dishwashing fluids, so many things have been introduced, and we still haven't died out as a human species.
I know, it's wild, isn't it?
The fertility has gone down, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of those factors or a combination is the reason, and it will ultimately ring the alarm bells. But for humans, it always takes catastrophic events before they change their behavior. It's sad. I mean, it's.
So something I want to come on to, which is key additives. What are some additives to look out for when buying food? Is there anything that's like a gut disruptor or anything that a person should be looking out for directly when buying food that's a no-no when it comes to gut health?
Yeah, so the artificial or the non-nutrient sweeteners, that's a good example. Because people thought that this would actually solve the problem of the excessive sugar consumption.
Yeah.
But then there have been studies by some very reputable scientists in Israel that have shown that, first of all, it has no benefit in patients with diabetes. Secondly, it has negative effects on the gut microbiome and on metabolism. So even though some of these things are not absorbed, like sucralose, they still do not have the benefit that are being claimed. I think there's a gradient of stevia seems to be one of the better ones. Sucralose is one of the worst ones. My advice is always, if you want to do something for your health in terms of sugars, try to wean yourself off the sweet addiction, which is programmed early in life. Americans have the sweet preference is different from most other countries in the world.
Everything's sweet in America, I feel like. And also sweetness is 1,000 times sweeter than sugar.
Yeah.
So our brain is getting, that chemical reaction still, even though it's not having the kind of the biochemical breakdown of it, it's still releasing our hunger hormones to tell our body that we've got a huge amount of sugar.
Yeah, and there are two things, particularly with young children, where these taste preferences are being programmed. So a good example is, a country that has some of the worst problems with obesity and metabolic diseases is Mexico. And the CEO of Coke Mexico, they had a marketing campaign to pregnant mothers, that when your newborn cries or can't sleep, give him or her Coke. They'll sleep. So with the sugar. So they definitely, a whole generation was programmed for sweet preferences. On the other hand, what I personally have noticed, if you consistently avoid sweets, your sugar preference will change as an adult. So it's not something that you're stuck with, and you actually don't like the sugar anymore, or it's like everything is too sweet. All of a sudden you dilute it, or you take. So in my early
Try
days,
and wean yourself off it, basically, is one of the most powerful ways.
that's not something that Americans like to hear, to wean themselves off something, but sugar and sweets are definitely something.
Yeah.
No matter if it's sugar or the non-nutritive sweeteners,
A gastroenterologist told this to my parents, and I would love your just like natural quick response, and you can just say yes or no, is that my dad actually does have IBD as well. And he was ill on a cruise, and everyone was getting food poisoning, and this gastroenterologist didn't get it. And they said to him, how come you are the only person who's not got the sickness bug? And he said, I put it down to drinking only when I'm on holiday. So he wasn't advocating drinking this every day. But he was saying when I'm on holiday, I drink a can of Coke to stop me getting sick. And I only do that when I'm traveling. And that's all I do. And then I don't drink it afterwards. And so my parents are now obsessed that whenever they're away, they drink a can of Coke. Is there any truth to that? Like, is it just literally killing everything in our guts that's maybe having an effect?
It is definitely a semi-poison, for I'm not sure if these studies have been done. It's antimicrobial effects. I would not, based on your dad's experience, I would not recommend it. I think there's other things that you can do.
I mean, I didn't look into it, but they swear by it now. And they've never get sick.
Yeah, no, well, that's where part of the central programming comes in as well. If you strongly believe in this, you're protected,
There you go.
But being a scientist, if I saw experiments that showed this, that it actually has antimicrobial effects, I would change my mind on it. So.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I still have to take it with a pinch of salt, but I'm like, if it works for you, then it's fine. Just make sure you clean your teeth more than you usually would, because your teeth will fall out. But this leads me to like my final kind of theme of this show, which, I think what's really interesting is it's obvious how interconnected the brain and the gut is. And something that really fascinated me last year with a lot of the stuff that I went through and all the kind of gut problems that I ended up experiencing is the gut-brain health with psychedelics. And this is like a really interesting therapeutic area that's kind of coming up for lots of different reasons, not just for the mind or the brain or trauma or whatever it is. There's so many different areas where this is becoming quite profound in research. And I sent you, just before you came on here, a review done recently, like 2 months ago, November 2024, titled Mind Over Matter, the Microbial Mindscapes of Psychedelics and the Gut-Brain Axis, which explores the topic on psychedelics and their impact on the gut. So, kind of going through today, realizing how interconnected the brain is with the gut microbiome. Why do we think that psychedelics is having such a moment? And is there anything you can tell us about, because what I don't want to do is people to run out and take loads of psychedelics and think it's going to dramatically cure them, it's a magic pill. But I would be interested if there is any science on this at the moment. There's a few intriguing points to it that, first of all, mushrooms have not just psilocybin, they have multiple molecules in it. Some of them are also these large molecules that cannot be absorbed in the small intestine that go down, and then the microbes process them. So clearly, whenever you consume mushrooms, you will have also a message that you send to your microbes. The second one, which is almost the most intriguing one, that this receptor, this serotonin receptor subtype. So receptors are these molecules that connect the serotonin molecule to something inside the cell, some process. And there's this 5-HT2A receptor subtype that mediates the psychedelic experiences in the brain. And serotonin plays a big role both in the brain and in the gut. That receptor is present both in the gut cells, but also on certain microbes. So it's almost certainly will affect microbial behavior, probably gene expression.
and what component of the overall experience it is. I mean, there's different effects of psilocybin or other psychedelics. Some are the psychedelic ones, visual hallucinations, and the other ones are these more long-term, these neuroplastic effects that rewire the brain and can have long-lasting beneficial effects on anxiety and depression. And then it does several things for you hours afterwards, and the next couple of days, you almost feel and think differently. That's almost like suggests there's something going on in a slower system in our bodies, which could be the microbes producing metabolites in response to stimulation, a one-time stimulation with a 5-HT2A agonist from the psilocybin. So I think it's a very intriguing aspect. It will probably differ between different people because we all have different microbiomes. So some people may have a strong component, microbial component, others almost a negligible one, and it's sort of difficult still to do these studies. There's a lot of regulatory work you have to do in order to do psilocybin studies.
Well, I think what's so interesting is, and we haven't touched upon this, and I'll just say it quickly, is that you speak also about adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs. And I touched upon this within a conversation with Dr. Sarah Gottfried when we spoke about hormones and autoimmune diseases in women. And she wrote a bit about adverse childhood experiences and trauma and how that can be linked to a lot of these problems, and also how she is a big believer in the research coming up with MDMA therapy and psilocybin. So she spoke a lot about that on the show with me, and I kind of looked at your work as well, and you said that there's a 54% link between adverse childhood experiences and IBS, which I found so interesting. And so my natural thought process when I was thinking about the psychedelic work is so much about this might be able to connect us to traumas that happened in the past, or to experiences maybe that we've shut down and kind of put away. And this is where some of the interesting work could come up with the gut microbiome and maybe people that do suffer with gut problems, that this could be another level that we can access to kind of help us in a therapeutic sense.
These early adverse life events, I mean, first of all, they're very common. So like when I first got interested in this, it was sexual abuse. There was a paper by somebody like 30 years ago that said, IBS is more common in people that had a sexual abuse history. But it's not just sexual abuse. That's actually the least common one. There's all these other factors, which you probably talked to your other guests about, which we have studied since then. And they affect vulnerability to all the chronic diseases, not just IBS. To have for the first time a therapy that has these neuroplastic effects, which you can actually reprogram things. Because, patients always ask me, I had these bad childhood experiences. Am I doomed with this? So can I do anything? And yeah, I mean, you can work in therapy, but it's very tedious. You may have to spend years dealing with it. And now we have something that potentially, in combination with very specialized therapists who, those therapists I don't think really exist yet in large numbers, but hopefully they will in the future, that there's a whole new field of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy which deals with these issues, and it seems right now, from what we can see, and if you look at all this, I mean, this is such an ancient system that our brains have been interacting with for tens of thousands of years, and still in places like we see the last remnants of these prehistoric ancestors, like the Yanomami on the Orinoco. It's an essential part of their culture. They've done it for tens of thousands of years. That a system like this does not have, many benefits that because we shut off research like 40 years ago, and have not been allowed to pursue this further. Yeah, my gut feelings would tell me that that's something. And if I started my career over again, it's the area that I would get into, because I think it's the most fascinating part.
And I hope there's going to be abundance of research coming. I also think it's an exciting area. It's one that I'm very fascinated. I just know it's very hard with the research at the moment. But my only worry with psychedelics is that sometimes they can be misused in a way that it can be unhelpful. And actually also, there's also a worry for me that people see it as the only route answer, and there's no other work that needs to be done around that. So a lot of people might go on experiences and think, well, if I have this, everything's going to be cured. And I think we've got to remember it's very like sacred earth medicine. That's one of many layers. And I think a lot of the work kind of comes after you take the medicine, and all the things that we spoke about, such as all the different mental health therapies that you can integrate, and having somebody there to talk you through it, and the nutrition and the lifestyle adjustments. I think all of those things are important in combination with it.
Yeah, and that's, in my opinion, that's definitely the future. I mean, how we pay for this as a country, that's another question, because you need very specialized. These are not 1 or 2 session therapies. You need very experienced people. There's some hope. Now there's this movement. God knows where it's going to go, to make America healthy again. Which,
that's what we're doing with Live Well Be Well. That's the reason why we're here.
And so maybe this will get attention, at the highest level. I'm not sure. Maybe overly optimistic, but we have moved with interacting with health and disease in the wrong direction. Throwing billions or trillions of money at it, keeping people alive, not doing the things that would prevent some of these chronic diseases, and have much more natural treatment approaches. And it's always going to be the multidisciplinary approach, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I think with someone who's listening to this, whether maybe they're feeling empowered after this to kind of look at this in an interconnected approach, what would you say is a roadmap to someone who's wanting to improve their gut health?
So the first step has to be education and increased awareness. And that part has obstacles because of what's been happening, these multiple voices on social media. I mean, so how do people actually extract what's really going to be helpful and what's true and what's just somebody came up with, like the Ozempic because they want to sell something, but it's still, and this is what I've dedicated my efforts now in that stage of my career to play that role, the second part is, once you become aware of it, so the increased awareness and education to taking on self-responsibility and empowerment, and I think the third thing, really important for mothers, to realize that this starts during pregnancy, not even after pregnancy. It starts during pregnancy,
or even before pregnancy.
Even before pregnancy. So stay healthy during pregnancy, minimize the stress, medication. So we're pretty good in minimizing medications during pregnancy, but not the stress level. Then after birth, all these things, the food programming the babies. This is probably the biggest consequence. If you change the programming of children based on their eating habits, their food preferences, their sweet preferences, that in the long term will probably have the biggest impact.
And for anyone kind of now today that's listening to this, that's an adult, what would you say is the main importance for their gut health?
Well, I would say, coming back to this, it's always hard for me to narrow it down to one thing, but look at your diet, adapt your diet to a diet that's healthy, optimal for your gut microbiome and for you. and avoid all the negatives that are coming up as much as you can. I think most people can do that, or part of it, not everything. Some of these food items are expensive, but there's no question in my mind. There's so much data and evidence now on the health benefits of a largely plant-based diet without ultra-processed foods that this is almost like a certainty. Like, don't get distracted by messages you get against this.
Yeah.
If you can implement that diet consistently, you will get benefits, immediate benefits, both in terms of your, if you have difficulties with your weight or any chronic diseases, this one intervention will help you.
So what I would say to that as a nutritionist is, for practical terms for people to implement, is what I find really interesting when people come to see me in clinic is I get them to write a food diary. And it's still a very old school method, but I think it's the most important for that patient because they're actually taking, one, accountability for their health, which I believe is the most important step. And two, they're actually writing down and becoming reflective on what they're eating. And I think the biggest problem that I can see today is if I just get somebody to recall their diet to me, very, very quickly, they'll miss out half of it because it's a recall bias. If somebody is actively writing it down, they're actually seeing, and sometimes they're shocked, one, maybe how little they're eating, and that's why they're hungry, or two, they're saying, wow, I'm really overeating. And I try to get them to write down that with the water intake that they have or any other beverage drinks. But in the next column, I get them to write how they're feeling. Are they eating alone? Are they eating with people? And I think these are the really important things because I think when we can take an overall look at our diet, it's very easy then for somebody to say, well, this is where I could see blind spots. And I think sometimes with messaging around anything on health, we try to think that we can jump to that very, very quickly without seeing where we're starting. So I think with everyone that's listened today on everything we've spoken about, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's the nutrition, if people are eating on the move and they're not mindful, then that's also going to be having an effect on what they're eating and how they're eating and how much they're eating. So I think, like, from everything I learned today with the importance of the mind and the body connected, is to actually just, first of all, before changing anything, like, take account of where you are and be reflective on it, because that's when you can really impact some big change.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with this more. I mean, I almost think now, when we talk about the Mediterranean diet, it's really the Mediterranean lifestyle. It's every time that we go to Italy and see this in summer, with people sitting outside in outside restaurants and cafes and walk around for hours every evening. That's part of, and I saw this was a couple of times in Parma, in this Emilia-Romagna area of Italy, which is not, they don't stick to a Mediterranean diet, really. It's ham and cheese, Parmesan cheese, and a lot of pasta, and very few vegetables, and not a lot of fruit. And you look at their life expectancy, and it's the same as people in Sicily, who eat the healthy food. What they both have in common, they have the same lifestyle. It's not just what you eat, but with whom you eat it and how you feel when you eat it. Because the brain sends these signals to the gut when you eat, and it
helps metabolize and all the nutrients,
helps,
all of that. And I think the biggest importance is when we're stressed, all of our blood circulation leaves the GI tract to kind of work on pumping our heart and getting us away from stress. So being calm, being mindful when we eat, I think is really important. So I asked this question to all of my guests when we finish, and we've done nearly 300 episodes now. We've rarely had the same answer. So what does live well, be well mean to you?
Yeah, live well basically means you're a good citizen on this planet, and you do all the right things both for yourself, but also for the planet, for the world around you, and that living well has the effect that you feel well, like that you be well. I think a very big part of our problems is we've become, and that includes diet. People, when you think about diet, they don't think about the consequence of a particular diet on all the systems around us, on the animals, on the environment, on the. So if you live well, you're aware of this, and you will feel good because you're not just doing it for yourself; you're doing it for the whole system. And for me, that's a very important, aspect of being well, being happy. And it essentially addresses all the topics that we talked about, because all this is basically living well and then feeling well because of this. Like, I don't want to feel well just after I eat a piece of chocolate. That's a transient experience of being well. You want to be well and feel well when you wake up every morning when you wake up.
That's why living well is being well. So it's an ecosystem, as you very well described it. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was great. I hope you got the information that you were hoping to get from a gastroenterologist, but
we always want different experts, and I'm really pleased that we managed to touch on IBS and IBD and gut health in a different way than what we usually do. So thank you so much for all the expertise that you brought to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.